Hi guys, this is Athletes Capital. Today's guest is very interesting person.
There was 1 in 6 NFL players who, after they retired, had bankruptcy issues.
He's an ex-goalkeeper and now he's in a world of business, finance, and media and sports entertainment.
I'm a professional athlete. Do I have an agent, or is my family the agent?
We're gonna talk a lot about wealth management for athletes, who athletes have to trust in terms of managing their assets.
You have to educate yourself as an athlete on who can I trust to manage the activities that are going to make me retire in a very comfortable way after my playing days are over.
I'm sure you're gonna receive a lot of value from the conversation.
It has to be approached as a business completely, making business plans of where do we see this asset going in 5 years.
Let's jump on it. Edoardo Grandi, welcome to Athletes Capital.
Thank you, Nikolai. It is a great privilege to be on the Athletes Capital podcast today.
First of all, I want to appreciate your time that you're putting it to be with us on the call. You have a lot of value to add. And second, I watched some of your content and I'm sure that we will create a lot of value on this episode as well, because you know that we are attacking a pretty important message, at least in my point of view.
I agree with you, Nikolai, and I'm so enthused today to be speaking about this topic and engaging in this conversation that is going to create incredible value.
First of all, let's start with the basics. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself, about your background.
So I grew up in a northern city of Italy, where I began to play as a goalkeeper for the first time. Playing football was my first sport until I moved to the United States as a young teenager, and that's when I really started to live the life of a student athlete, where I had to balance the performance requirements of being an athlete in the afternoon and a goalkeeper, and in the morning going to the classes and making up for my schoolwork. I played in the youth levels of important youth academies in Italy, like Bologna and Cesena, together with participating in preseasons of USL Championship clubs in the United States, like the Miami FC. Then, when I started to enter university, I knew that I had a very strong interest for entrepreneurship. And so I decided to pursue a bachelor's degree in economics and finance. When I was not in the classroom, however, I wanted to learn how were professional athletes creating and building wealth outside of their sport, because my objective has always been to become a professional athlete. And I found out that they do it through media and then creating business ventures and entrepreneurial ventures together with investments. So, starting from that foundation, after my first semester, I launched a podcast called The Sport Businessman to interview entrepreneurs and professional investors to educate audiences on how can wealth be created in the sports industry, and also what are the strategies for creating profitable investments. This is my background, and it's the work that we've been developing at the Sport Businessman for the past 2 years.
As I mentioned you before our call, you're on the right place now to share whatever you have, because we are speaking essentially the same language here. Let's speak a little bit about the statistics of how many players after their careers they have either financial problems or they go broke.
Well, everybody in the media, together with posts on social platforms, every time that they speak about how are athletes building generational wealth, there are always the same names that are mentioned, like Tom Brady, Shaquille O'Neal, who built a billion-dollar empire investing in Domino's franchises, Lionel Messi, who is investing in sports technology together with Ronaldo and his real estate investments. However, they're never really talking about the athlete that has a short career window and how are they able to create wealth as well. That was the big question that I found interesting to understand. And when developing research, we found that one specific when we have to analyze who are the athletes who have the shortest career spans, those are NFL players who have an average career of 3.5 years. However, the same can be said about many other professional athletes around the world and in Europe. So the statistics said that there was 1 in 6 NFL players who, after they retired, had bankruptcy issues. That's 15.7%. And there were professional papers and professional articles talking about how 90% of an athlete's wealth is built during their playtime, during their playing careers, and the rest depends only from what they do with it. So financial literacy at the end of the day was only up to them, and without receiving the structured guidance, this is uh, this is the issues that makes the professional athletes retire bankrupt. For this reason, we found it interesting to learn how do professional athletes generate wealth after their careers, and we have to start by understanding what is their earning window. So, how many years are they going to be in their career for? Because the athletes who have earned the most money in their career had the opportunity to earn a lot more money than the athlete who had a shorter career. Then today there are very, very important topics which I find interesting to dive into more together, of how athletes can build themselves into um, investment partners for private equity, venture capital, or different types of businesses through their personal brand, where instead of receiving cash for endorsements, they can receive equity um, and own a part of the company. Together with, there has to be a stronger education given to professional athletes on what are the different types of asset classes. And if they don't understand those asset classes very well, then it's much more important to make them develop a personal assessment on what are their interests and help them to understand, and as an advisor, um, which are the types of activities which can help them, which they can understand that they're passionate about, but can also approach it in a point of view of making the activity more valuable, whether it's making it more efficient or giving strategic guidance on improving the operations.
Well, I mean, you said a lot of important things, but I would like to start with one of them. One of the dynamics that I think all over the sport is that from a very early age, these people they start to receive more money that they can spend. But because to be a professional athlete, you have to be 100% focused on your craft, and it's just the nature of the sport. And you don't have so much time, or they think they don't have so much time to educate themselves and start investing during their career, not waiting until their career is over. So, how an athlete can challenge that and approach this hurdle?
Well, I find that it's true that an athlete has to completely and fully immerse themselves in their sport and be completely focused on the sport that they play to become the best possible athletes that they can, because that's what's going to make them increase their earning potential and maximize it and have longevity in their career, because that is what unlocks higher earning opportunities, and therefore at the same time also the amount of money that can be used to create ventures that help to build the wealth of the athlete after their career. However, there's a very important point that has to be understood, because when you are so focused on becoming the best professional athlete, that's when you have to educate yourself on who are you going to delegate the tasks of creating your generational wealth. And that's where the wealth team comes into place. You have to educate yourself as an athlete on who can I trust to manage the activities that are going to make me retire in a very comfortable way after my playing days are over. And the wealth team is made up of a strategist who manages and coordinates every single activity of the athlete, and that acts like a quarterback in American football, like a point guard in basketball, or even like a center midfielder who's the engine of the team, who runs the play from the from the from the goalkeeper to try to score a goal for the attacker. Then there is the agent, who professional athletes and young athletes today have to truly educate themselves on the ethical practices of agents. Because agents have the limitations of not having the financial expertise, because those are the professionals who help you to sign the contracts with the athletes, and their goal is to make you as much money as possible on the field, as well as your business manager. So the manager that helps you to earn endorsement deals and sponsorship deals and manages those activities. Then there is another important player in the wealth team, which is the attorney for contracts and trusts for to help your family, and also allocate and help to negotiate any endorsement deals or contracts with agents. And then there is a public accountant that you should have in your wealth team, together with a tax strategist, because although nothing of what I'm saying should be considered as or taken as financial advice, but uh, make an important part of how you're going to be managing your wealth is where are you going to be living in your highest earning years. So having a tax strategist and consulting tax strategist help the athlete to maximize their earning potential, and also potential new business activities and future investments. And then there's also the insurance component, which helps to manage any difficulty that can occur during your playing days or after your career. So it all starts from educating yourself on, if I'm going to be so focused on building myself into the best professional athlete that I can be, first I have to build the foundation of education on who can I trust, what are the ethical considerations of an advisor for building the most trustworthy wealth team that's going to help me when I retire.
First of all, being a being an athlete, everybody should know the power of a team, because a good team always wins against a good individual in the long run. So athletes definitely understand the power of a team. And I always mention that people who are watching these episodes will not become professional investors, but they will be able to ask better questions their team, and they will know how to filter their team members, so they will have somebody that is keeping their back. Another thing Another thing very important is that in with one of my guests we discussed. He said that he wants to make athletes dangerous in terms of investing, because the most important thing for them to understand is that there's a difference between being rich and being wealthy, and wealth is actually created through time and compounding. And basically, the athletes have the opportunity to compound the money that they're receiving and create actually wealth. But they should understand that time is essential, and it's not a 2 years time frame to become a wealthy person. So what would you say about that? That actually to build generational wealth, as you mentioned before our call, you actually need time, not just capital.
So I find that the the athletes should definitely start educating themselves when they are 17, 18, 19 years old, when they're about to be approaching their first professional contract, because minimum salaries in professional, the big four major sports leagues in the United States, minimum salaries are over $700,000. Together in Europe, when signing at 17, 18 years old, or even 19 years old, your first professional contracts, you're looking at 100K. You're looking at 100,000 euros or of capital. So for this reason, it's crucial to start early, educating yourself on who is going to be part of my wealth team. But at the same time, I find it very interesting for there are no resources out there that specifically support athletes to help them understand how wealth is created. Because we have hosted on our media platform many wealth managers and who have talked about the vices of professional athletes and their spending. So together with myself having lived in professional environments, you can truly tell one thing in common with with those that do end up maximizing their career earnings, which is delaying gratification. And as well as we were talking about, the important point that you mentioned before is of being ruthlessly focused on your career and on your mandate to be only the professional athlete until your playing days are over. But at the same time, having an advisor who you can trust and who is credible to show you the avenues that can happen after your career. And as the sooner you're able to get those information in and start educating yourself, the more the more years you play, the more you start um, building an identity of how can you create value after your playing days are over, or even start creating that value while you're an athlete in your prime. Because if you start learning it when you're 22, 21 years old, you can already start projecting in if any uncertainty happens, like I have an injury or the coaches next seasons don't want me, but I'm building a wealth plan that I know in 3 years I can own my own sports team, or I can own my video game company, or I have my media platform. Then you are less likely, when you're going to be toward your last years of your careers, to be worried about what are you going to do if you're not going to be able to play anymore.
Okay. And you mentioned something important. I want to dig a little bit deeper, and that's delayed gratification. When you're young, and I totally get that, immediately when you start to receive, when you see a lot of zeros in your contract, you immediately want to improve your lifestyle, and you immediately want to improve the lifestyle of everything around you, everyone around you. But that's not, or I'm not saying athletes should not do that, but if you do that on a continuous basis, you're basically not allowing yourself to compound the money that you're receiving. And I think that's a little bit of a mental game, not so much of a knowledge how money works, but it's for sure part of the game. Would you agree on that?
There has to be tailor-made solutions for the wealth management practices of professional athletes, because wealth managers who aren't tailoring their solutions to the needs of professional athletes are then complaining that professional athletes aren't listening to them, because they might be applying the same concepts which uh, they're applying to an entrepreneur who has just exited their business, or They're using the strategy that they're using with a professional who inherited their earnings or their current wealth from a family member. So lavish spending on things that professional athletes like, together with the expectations that come with helping family, because it's a responsibility and they shouldn't feel guilty about it. But they should have the system in place of having an advisor. And this is credit to the wealth management practices that in these past months have been releasing reports and have been sharing some strategies that they're tailoring for professional athletes, that uh, there has to be plans and buckets of income that rightly has to be allocated to these investments that shouldn't be considered wrong because they're part of the lifestyle, but they have to be budgeted for. They have to be budgeted for, and they have to also be taken into the equation of what are the responsibilities that the high career earnings that a professional athlete has. Uh, they have to be taken into consideration together with what is the investment plan. So this goes in the plan. This is has to be considered.
What should be a tailor-made plan for the finances of a up-and-coming athlete? For example, he just signed his first contract. Just give us some brief points that should be in there.
Well, definitely is do I have an agent? Do I have an agent? Let's simulate the scenario. I'm a professional athlete. Do I have a? Can we also let's improve the simulation? Do I have an agent, or is my family the agent?
No, you have an agent.
The first thing that I would do um, as an athlete, and I'm starting to educate myself, is does my agent have in his team of the agency representatives who can support me with my wealth strategy? Then, if he does, I'd ask him, to educate me. I'd ask him to educate me on what are my um what investments or where can I deploy my capital to say in 5 years that can grow to help me see my future in a more stable way and not only depend on my future contract. That's the first thing that I would. That's the first thing that I would do. And then, of course, I would try to understand, what is their background. I was also try to speak to my senior teammates on my team. I would be asking them, who are their wealth strategists? What are they suggesting them? I would ask them, what um, are they currently invested in any entrepreneurial ventures? And then I would also ask them, how did they educate themselves on those entrepreneurial ventures? How did they try to understand the commercial architecture of the business? How does the business make money if they were invested into businesses? I'd ask them if they had started their own type of business. I would ask them um, questions about how they would face situations of career uncertainty, or what they did in moments of career uncertainty like injury. Also, I would also ask them, how does their agent treat them when it's time to pay fees, or when it's time to actually pay for their services. So that's the first thing that I would do. The first thing that I would do is I would lay the foundation to understanding how are my teammates approaching this situation. How have leaders in the team approached the wealth creating strategy? I would ask them also, who helped them. Also, what books did they read? Because reading books kind of has like its own limitation. And that's the first thing I would do. I wouldn't specifically start investing any of my money, and as soon as I sign my first big check, I would start asking all of my teammates, what are they doing, and also ask my talent representatives, my representatives, such as my agent, all the advice that I can get on this specific strategy. And to be honest, this can lead to maybe finding out that the agent doesn't have the ability and capability to support me and in what I want to truly do. So um, this is why it's fundamental to learn from your teammates. And I wouldn't invest anything in my first in my first year. I would wait until I'm more mature into my 22, 23, and I've understood also how does the agent landscape work? How does the league that I'm in make money? How does the team that I'm playing in make money? Understanding the business that I'm involved in before making any investment decisions or any commitments.
I will add to that, to educate yourself, because there are a lot of asset classes, a lot of legitimate asset classes. I'm not speaking about something that popped up a year ago, but because everyone has a different risk appetite, right? I mean, someone feels comfortable putting money into crypto. I don't understand it at all, and I'm not putting anything into it. But it's different. It depends on the risk appetite and the knowledge that you have around that. So that's also something important, and that's something that we will try to distribute here as a content on Athletes Capital. One more thing: if someone came to me 10 years ago while I was still playing and offered me for some amount of money to own a piece of a sport franchise, a small piece of a sport franchise, I will definitely jump on that opportunity with 100 kilometers per hour. But there weren't any opportunities like that 10 years ago. But now, me and you, we see that investing in sports assets is becoming more and more popular, more in the US, but I think in the Europe as well. And more people are talking to that about that, and more capital is going into the sports assets. So let's dive deeper in this topic, because it's extremely interesting for me, and I know for the audience will be as well.
Well, we saw it the other day as well, yesterday or the day before, that Lionel Messi invested in a fifth division uh, club in Catalonia. We saw it last month that Cristiano Ronaldo became a minority owner of 25% in Almeria. Thibaut Courtois invested in Le Mans together with Djokovic and other Formula One athletes last month as well. Luka Modric, 40 years old, playing in AC Milan today, is a minority investor in Swansea City. But this trend of professional athletes being minority owners in professional teams has to be approached with caution, because national team talents were becoming owners of their small time clubs which they grew up in 10 years ago, 15 years ago, like Buffon with Carrarese. It was an investment that was completely unsustainable. And but the deal was brought in because they he felt he felt the duty to invest in the club of his city. Becoming an owner of something that, even though you play it, you don't truly understand how does it commercialize, how does it make money, how does the organization and structure of the company work, who are the people that have to be involved to make this club run efficiently and in a way that makes the investment bring returns in future years, has to be completely assessed and understood before professional athletes become owners of professional teams. Now, there's a very important component that is that professional athletes with influence like Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi has when entering these minority positions in these clubs, that with their brand they're able to grow audiences, all to bring more audiences and fans to that club from all over the world, together with increasing their social media presence and followers of the club. But I find that as a professional athlete, it is very very important to understand how does a football club make money today, and also learning from who are the investors who are owning majority positions. What are their reasons for investing in the club? Is it to increase my value? Is it to increase my value and sell me to another club? Is it to you know understand there are so many components of for example, a football club that have has to be understood before making any investments, and this is why it, there is a growth of advisors who are educating the sports investment landscape, which should be listened to because they bring perspectives and perspectives that help to understand truly how sports investments can make can make more money. And as I mentioned before, the media and the media and the brand of the athlete is very important when owning these minority positions. So this is it all comes down to asking more and more questions on educating yourself as an athlete on how is my the industry that I'm involved in making money, and how can I become an owner of uh, of one of these businesses one day. But first, it starts from understanding the commercial architecture and how can I improve it with my brand. How does my brand fit in with the narrative of the football club or sports business that I'm going to be getting involved in? How can I create value for wherever I'm going to be deploying my capital in? Because without that, it's going to be it's going to be either passive or it's not going to go well.
That type of investments, although you put your heart and soul on the pitch, that type of investment should not be based on emotion. You should know where the returns are coming and how to create value post acquisition, correct?
Correct. And there has to be structures set in place before any acquisitions or before any uh, capital that I'm going to deploy as an athlete. I have to understand, how am I going to create value for this for this club? For example, if I were a 30-year-old professional footballer, and I have the career earnings of a senior player who's played for the past 10 years in Serie A. I have well over 10 millions of assets under management that I can invest in a football team, but I'm going to be owning, let's say, 30% of a European football club that I'm being proposed to invest in because they found that the talent pipelines and the future returns that can be in from the talent are an important opportunity. Well, myself as an athlete, I want to be involved because I want to be involved in, educating the talent that's going to be creating produced out of the academy. I want to be, doing calls with each of the young teams to understand, how are they performing, how are they doing, how are they, how are their coaches educating them, how are they treating their mind, how are they preparing themselves to become the best athletes that they can be. That's one way that I can add value for my investment and the investment group that I'm going to be coming in, because my I want to be involved at a level where I know that I can make an impact for the investment that I'm making. Uh, that's one way that I find I would create value with if I were offered a minority position in a football club. Together with that's the most important way that I find interesting to create value, and it has to be mapped out before where you can create value in the investment.
In my short investment career, my sports career, in the beginning I was very focused. Me and my team were very focused on deal making. So we learned the hard way that actually the real value is created post acquisition, and you should have a strict plan how you're going to create that value once you acquire whatever the deal is. And the same is true with football clubs or sports assets in general. But one other dynamic I want to discuss with you, and that is, in the past we saw that sports assets were reserved for the rich families or rich owners. But now we see a model that is developing where a consortium of investors or a group of investors is putting their capital, expertise, and know-how and brands. They're putting them together to own sports assets. Why do you think that model is changing from having one family or one rich person who is actually owning the majority of a sports asset to a model where a group of investors is actually combining their assets to own the sports franchise?
Well, it starts from the excellence of North America, who actually have been allowing the NFL for families to allow investments of private equity to come in with expertise to support the liquidity constraints that these legacy investors who treated sports teams not as assets but as trophies and toys. Now, the same can be said of how football clubs are being football clubs are being of how Middle Easterns treat investments in sports teams. It's always seen as a legacy asset, as a trophy asset, because there aren't the operational capabilities to make the asset generate returns. That can only be seen in major sports franchises and leagues like the NFL, Major League Baseball, and the NBA. Today, these investment groups are entering European football and helping to shape the formation of new emerging sports league. Because owners there is so much work that has to be done more on behalf of making club owners understand of how their commercial architecture can be improved. Um, and this can be learned from how sports is treated as an entertainment in North America and in the United States, because sports is for the fans, and fans are the ones who choose if they want to be attending the game on the weekend. And capturing that fan, educating the fan, helping the find more ways for the fans to engage with their teams and with the players that they love to watch and engage with and who they want to be inspired by, is going to help the team to make more money and generate new revenues. So I find that there has to be so much more education given to club owners around European football, specifically Italy and France. There are so many case studies that I find interesting, Nikolai, to talk about together in the future times that we meet. But specifically to answer your question, yes, professional investors are coming in to purchase European football clubs with the objective to build data infrastructure and departments and real estate projects surrounding the stadiums and maximize the ROI on youth academy investments. But there are so many limitations today to these investments that are made. And this is also one of the reasons why so many investors are coming in and coming out. And I'm so excited to be learning what are the developments going to be for um, for allowing investors to maximize their investments, because you have to let investors get their returns. If not, they're going to leave. And this is why investors are only getting their returns once they sell in European football, and specifically in Italian football. So I'm so excited to learn and update each other on the future development about these investments in European football.
And in relation to that, while you were talking, a question popped up in my mind to ask you. Do you think that it's possible, or is there an opportunity if a group of sports people, people from sports, group of athletes, they gather together their assets and buy a sports team, doesn't matter in what sport. Does such opportunities exist? Because I mentioned you 10 years ago when I was playing, there weren't such thing. I mean, the rich, the high net worth individual were the owners of the sports franchises and the sports clubs, and athletes were just athletes.
Well, there are many ways that professional athletes can get involved in football clubs together as a group of athletes to get together for an investment in a football club or any sports franchise. There are dedicated funds that have been launched in the past 5 years, which are specifically for helping athletes to invest in sports teams together. This can be seen in many sports investments, like in Formula One, where there are teams like Alpine Formula One, that have investors like Trent Alexander-Arnold, Anthony Joshua, but also football clubs, as I mentioned before, in second divisions like Le Mans in France, that has Thibaut Courtois, Djokovic, and other F1 drivers. There are clubs like Venezia, that are owned by investment groups that specifically help professional athletes to invest. And club deals can be made with professional athletes and football clubs. But there has to be the important component of how are we going to be creating value for this asset, because trophy asset plays today are unsustainable. Trophy asset investments today in professional football are unsustainable for the players, for the fans, and for the investors themselves.
So you're trying to say that it has to be approached as a business and you have to know where the
It
returns are
has to be
coming.
approached. It has to be approached as a business completely, making business plans of where do we see this asset going in 5 years. It has to be completely treated as a business, knowing the commercial architecture. How do we understand the financials of this company, how they performed in the past? What do we project it to be in 3, 5 years? What are the revenue streams that we can activate immediately? What are the revenue streams that we can activate in the long term? What are the let's can we position this investment for more professional athletes to come join us in the future? How are we going to build the media and the narrative to position this club internationally? Can we build a docu-series for this? Can we be the first? Can we build a docu-series and a media company that of 5, 6 footballers trying to bring a club from the sixth to the first division? There is so much importance in the storytelling and the value that can be created. So it all starts from understanding how value can be created.
I understand that US is a bit of a different market, but I remember when Mark Cuban sold his team, the Dallas Mavericks, he said that probably he will never buy another sports franchise because the valuations are so out of out of the normal ranges. But in the US, the market is different, in my opinion, because I mean, there the media and all the fans is, I mean, they treat it much more differently, and there is still opportunity for good returns there, in my opinion, at least.
Well, Mark Cuban launched launched a new fund that's going to target growth equity minority 5% stake positions in major league franchises. So that's going to be interesting to see.
I'll see a lot of the funds, of the investment funds, are buying minority positions. They don't want the control stake. Why is that dynamic?
Well, because growth equity positions allow the minority investor to let the owner keep control of the business while providing liquidity and financing support. And and this typically involves investments of from 5% to 30%, and or do not have any operational control or decision power. It can also be done to, clear help the business to repurchase any LP stakes, and clear the cap table. And it's interesting. We've had professional investors join our podcast to discuss how they approached sports investment, mentioning that a growth equity uh, is interesting for understanding how the asset class works, but it never really gives any operational opportunity to influence the decision making. And it usually falls between a venture capital early stage investment and between a buyout at a more mature stage of a company. So it's usually in the middle stage. And today it's seen in businesses that have, a it's usually done in businesses that have a stable that have a, not already profitable business model, but it's clear the way that they make money, but they're not yet profitable.
Just to clarify for our audience, when you say they give liquidity, that means that they allow some of the owners to exit their position so someone new can come in. Is that correct?
Yes, and it's useful, it's useful for the owners of it's useful for the owners of the businesses, to receive to receive to receive financings without giving up control. And it's one of the main areas of study and research of the sport businessman. It's one of the main themes: growth equity in sports assets.
Let's jump on another subject that is, I don't know, I think it's a little bit underestimated in the investment world, and that's mistakes. Because most of the people, there's a myth, especially in the athlete's mind, that they think that if you're an investor, you basically have all the answers. You make small mistakes, or you don't make mistakes, and whatever decisions you take, they are right. Let's talk a little bit about mistakes in the investment game.
Well, it goes back to the first points which we were talking about. What is the profile? And to be honest, with a professional athlete who is so focused on becoming the best professional athlete that they can be, de-risking the path to wealth creation with setting up a trusted wealth advisory team is so crucial. It's so crucial because there are so many professional athletes who have in history sued their advisors, sued their agents, because there was no transparency. There was no transparency, and it goes back to to these are mistakes uh, which have to be studied as well. Mistakes have to be studied of how have professional athletes made the mistakes of going bankrupt, trusting bad advisors in the past. Why have these things happened, and how can I de-risk my path? if I'm going to be so focused on earning as much career income as possible and create my vehicles that are going to help me to create wealth, how can I de-risk it and learn from the mistakes which, as I mentioned in the beginning, my seniors of my teams made? Am I surrounded by the right team to handle my contracts, to handle my endorsements, to handle my potential investments? Because there are agencies, there are there are sports agencies who only make their athletes invest in real estate. But am I surrounded by the right professionals who can guide me, um, who can guide me to a career of uh, of, of of building wealth outside of my sport?
While you were talking, I remembered another important example, and that's Bill Ackman. I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Of course, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's from Pershing Square, and they called him the baby Buffett or whatever. But every time he speaks about investing, he speaks actually very little about his investments. He speaks much more about the mistakes he did, and one of his biggest mistakes is he lost 4 billion on one investment. That was the Valiant Pharmaceutical. It was 2014-15. But the way he explained the process, how he lost the money, and how he step by step actually recovered from that, and his investors are still doing good, is extremely inspiring. And I recommend to everyone to watch him in YouTube, because he's really an inspiration, not only as an investor, but also from a personal side as well.
The best way to analyze, even as a professional athlete, how can I improve my performance? How can I improve my performance for my next game, even though I won 3-0 this weekend? How can I What mistakes that I make in that game, even though I won it, that are going to make me play an even better game in the next game? And how can I minimize my mistakes and maximize my performance without them?
I think mistakes and success, they are actually interrelated. And I will challenge you now with a question, and I don't know have you watched that or not, but do you know who is the football player that missed the most penalties in his career?
Lionel Messi,
Nope. Cristiano Ronaldo.
Cristiano Ronaldo,
Yeah, and now the opposite. Do you know who is actually the football player that scored the most penalties?
Francesco Totti,
No, again, the answer again is Cristiano Ronaldo.
Cristiano Ronaldo.
So he's on the both sides of the equation, you see?
Yeah,
So he made the most mistakes, but he
that's
actually
super interesting. Thank you for
scored the
asking.
most. Yeah.
Super interesting.
And actually, in sport, that's very visible. Not only in the investment world, but in sport, it's extremely visible. 1 week you can be the best, and after 3 days you play bad, and you're the worst player in the world. So that dynamic, I think, can be applied in life.
Yeah, yeah.
Eduardo, before we wrap this up, I want to ask you one final question. Imagine yourself being in a sports team. You're an athlete in a sports team, and you're in a summer camp or a winter camp, and you have a lot of free time. What books would you read, having the experience you have now? What books would you read, and what books would you recommend for an athlete to educate themselves or start educating themselves on the topics that we've spoken today?
To educate ourselves on the topics that we spoke about today, the first book that I would read is 1 to 0, written by Peter Thiel, co-founder of PayPal, and built uh, built his way through venture capital, just to understand the opportunity for building a business, scaling a business, 0 to 1, going from zero to having an idea to deploying the idea and starting the business. That's very interesting, regardless of the conflicts and differentiated and controversial opinions of Peter Thiel. Then then I would definitely recommend the book um, of Ray Dalio on principles, because he discusses that we are operational machines, and we have to create systems. We have to create systems for our performance and how we live our days and how we live life for team building, team bonding, and working together in teams. This is super important for professional athletes because too much time is wasted in between trainings, in between one meeting to another, playing video games, wasting time playing video games, and understanding that we're operational machines is super important. And then I find it very very interesting to recommend the book that I actually have. You know, I actually no, I actually recommend reading books of the most important three books. Three books I recommend to read. One is What They Didn't Teach You. After those two, I recommend um, What They Didn't Teach You at Harvard Business School, written by Mark McCormack, which is the book of how sports marketing started. One of the first sports marketing agencies in the world, also representing how professional athletes started receiving endorsement deals. That is very important to read for professional athletes. Then reading the books on the best agents in history, like the one of Michael Jordan, and also the book of the number one agent in American football, which is his 40-year careers of deal making, explaining how deals are done, and so much advice on how to manage relationships in in deal making in sports.
Okay, well, Eduardo, we are at the end of the podcast. I really want to thank you, man, because we touched a lot of interesting topics. I really was surprised in a good way about your perspective. You really have a lot of knowledge about these things, and I'm looking forward meeting you again because we have a lot to talk about.
Grazie Nicolai. See you in Roma.